Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out Radio, Elvis Costello versus Everything. Oh, New British Canon.
A lot of people tell you all the things they did when they were 14 and all the bands they've been in ever since they learned to play the guitar. Well, we choose to not talk about those things, so I think they're very dull. The thing that's interesting is right now and the future.
Van Halen's David Lee Roth once said, "Rock critics love Elvis Costello because rock critics look like Elvis Costello." When he first appeared on top of the...
That's funny, David. Very funny.
Pops in September 1977, beyond Buddy Holly and Hank Marvin, there had been few rock stars with the nerd aesthetics of Elvis Costello. Though much too musically competent to be truly punk, he possessed a tongue bathed in acid and a remarkable ability to turn a phrase. But while this angry young man persona made him a star, it would also destroy him. This is New British Canon, and this is the story of Radio.
Oh, wow. I don't know much about Elvis Costello. Never got into him. I know he was banned from Saturday Night Live for playing a song he said he wasn't going to play. He switched what song he was going to play or something. And I guess that gets you banned. They say I got no respect. Elvis steals from the king. What? 1970 to 77. Declan McManus, The News, and a 7-year overnight success. Song Less Than Zero, Elvis Costello.
Declan McManus had been playing in pubs around Liverpool and London
that's his real
since
name?
1971 as a solo act in folk duo Rusty, then fronting country rock R&B group.
Elvis, the name Elvis, that's what he steals from the king. Okay, Delvin McManus. Okay. Declan.
As a solo act in folk duo Rusty, then fronting country rock R&B group Flip City. Though he had sent demos to labels and even showed up in person with an acoustic guitar, no one was interested. It wasn't until the advent of punk in 1976 that McManus got his proper start. London-based independent Stiff Records agreed to a single, then an album when it became apparent he was able to quickly provide enough songs. In needing a backing band, Stiff contracted the US group Clover for the album sessions. Later they would rename themselves The News, i.e. Huey Lewis's backing group.
What?
Though none were credited.
What? The News of Huey Lewis and the News first backed Elvis Costello, who was called Declan McManus? Declan McManus and the News? No, but back then they were called what? Clover. Declan McManus and Clover became Huey Lewis and the News, sort of. Wow. I love Huey Lewis's voice.
Though none were credited on the album. Produced by Stiff's resident desk jockey Nick Lowe, My Aim Is True was recorded over 6 4-hour sessions. So
Hang on. Nick Lowe? Of Nick Lowe? Nick Lowe? Hang on. Nick Lowe. Yeah, Nick Lowe. I saw him open for a Wilco. Look, it's purple. I've looked him up before. He's best known for the songs Cruel to Be Kind and I Love the Sound of Breaking Glass, as well as production work with Elvis Costello, Graham Parker, and others.
My Aim Is True was recorded over 6 4-hour sessions, songs often having been written mere days previous. The album would be lumped in with punk, despite its country roots and Americana twang. But the thing that truly made McManus stand out were his vivid, often bitter narratives of sad sacks and their revenge fantasies.
Sometimes I wish that I could stop you from talking.
Merged with a striking pop literacy. Allison features a nod to the Detroit Spinners' Ghetto Child.
I know this world is killing you.
Mystery Dance is a fuck-focused jailhouse rock.
Rhythm section was a purple gang, let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. Why don't you tell me about the mystery dance? I want to know about the mystery dance.
While Red Shoes infuses its Birdsian jangle with personal humiliation.
Said I'm so happy I could die. She said right there they left with another guy.
On the album's cover, McManus...
That's a great lyric. I said, I'm so happy I could die. She said, drop dead, then left with another guy. That's great.
She said right there they left with another guy.
On the album's cover, McManus stood knock-kneed with his Buddy Holly specs and pushed back hair, looking as disparate from a 70s pop star as possible.
Yeah.
But punk's revolution wiped the slate clean, and anything was possible, so long as it was pitched right. McManus had replaced his consonant-heavy surname with his Irish grandmother's maiden name, Costello, some time ago. But it was manager Jake Riviera's idea to steal his first name from the reigning king of rock and roll.
And it seemed, in the time that it was, 76, 77, just the kind of crazy thing that would probably keep people's attention. And we had no idea how long that attention might be. There was a sort of dare element to it, you know? It was somewhat shocking in some people's minds. And also then Elvis unfortunately died at that time, and it became a little bit controversial for a while. And
Due to issues with Stiff's distributor, Island, My Aim Is True's release was pushed back to late 1977, with the singles Less Than Zero and Allison issued in March and May as stopgap. Asked about Less Than Zero's meaning, Costello retorted, "I'm not going to explain my songs. If you can't hear what's going on in the song itself, then God help you. I'm not going to write a manifesto. I'm not going to write a leaflet to explain Less Than Zero. I'm a better songwriter than that, surely."
I respect that. I want to read the lyrics. There's a band called Less Than Zero, I believe. Jenny takes her clothes off in succession. Oh, while her husband rides a bumper in the president's procession. Okay? She sees him on the screen as she looks up from giving head. When he's had enough of that, her lover throws her on the bed to teach her she's alive, and suddenly he's dead. Turn up the TV, no one listening will suspect. Even your mother won't detect it. No, your father won't know. They think I've got no respect, but everything means less than zero. Hey, ooh, hey, ooh, hey. Calling Mr. Oh, calling Mr. Oswald. So the president must be JFK. Huh, okay. So there's this woman having an affair. Her husband is in Dallas with JFK on the day he gets shot. What does that mean? I have more questions now. Okay, let's look up what other people think the meaning is. Wikipedia. The song expressed Costello's anger after seeing former British Union of Fascists leader Oswald Mosley interviewed on television attempting to deny his racist past. Oh, okay. I interpreted Oswald as being Lee Harvey Oswald. On his first visit to the United States, Costello found that American audiences did not understand the song, writing in his 2015 autobiography, "I'm not sure if anyone in Cleveland has ever heard of Oswald Mosley." No. Wait, that sounds kind of familiar. Or give a damn about him when we play Less Than Zero that night. It was just some rock and roll music with fashionable sounding title. Later, he substantially rewrote the lyrics to refer to Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay. That was called the Dallas version. Okay, interesting. Still don't know what it means.
Years later, however, the song needs a bit of context. At the time, the fascist National Front was on the rise. The Mr. Oswald of the song is Oswald Mosley, leader of the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s. The BBC saw punk as a threat to the moral fibre of the nation's youth, yet broadcast a softball interview with Oswald that exposed those same youths to fascist ideology.
Turn up the TV, no one listening will suspect, even your mother won't detect it.
He was revoltingly unrepentant. I didn't want to see him debated, I wanted to see him defamed. Less Than Zero was a mere smudge on his memory.
Oswald and his sister are doing it again. They got the finest home movies.
Neither Less Than Zero nor Allison charted. Feeling that Costello was distracted by his data entry job, Stiff decided to pay him enough to quit and focus on his music career full time.
He had a data entry job. Y'all, I had a data entry job. It was so boring. This is a dumb story, but just to show you how boring it was. Actually, it wasn't that boring because I was in an office with some friends, but I worked for a photo marketing company called Bob Knight Photo Marketing in Tallahassee, Florida, while I was in college. And they did all the yearbook photos for like the annual yearbooks for most of the high schools in Florida. And so we would get these forms where people would fill out to order photos. So it was like name, address, what photo do you want, what blah, 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 blah. It was so boring. I would take the piece of paper and type what was on the paper in the computer Now, you don't even have to have that. But back then, it was a thing. Isn't that crazy? And I remember we used to get a lot of fake names. I guess high school kids would fill them out as jokes. And I remember one of them, one of the names was David Dick Grabber. I've always thought that was really funny. And Howie Feltersnatch. That's probably my favorite one. Howie Feltersnatch. David Dick Grabber's funny because it's so blatant, but Howie Feltersnatch is clever. Anyway, sorry for that.
My record advance consisted of £150, a new cassette tape recorder, and a Vox battery-powered practice amp. Wow. I took some of my newfound wealth and bought back a copy of Hard Day's Night that I had recently been forced to sell to pay the gas bill. About 3 weeks later, I was on the cover of a music paper. An overnight success after 7 years.
Wow.
Costello initially had an antagonistic relationship with the music press and refused to talk about his family, his musical past, or influences.
Respect.
He was also more than willing to remove journalists and music industry suits from show guest lists if he felt they had slighted him. Furthermore, he hated their initial lazy comparisons to Van Morrison, Bruce Springsteen, and stiff label mate Graham Parker in The Rumour. Costello was quickly painted as an angry, bitter young man. In one of his few candid early interviews, he jokingly laid out his main catalysts. The only two things that matter to me, the only motivation points for me writing all these songs, are revenge and guilt. Those are the only emotions I know about, that I know I can feel. Love, I don't know what that means really, and it doesn't exist in my songs.
Wow. I mean, yeah, he sounds bitter. The only two things that matter to me, the only motivation points for my writing all these songs, revenge and guilt. Those are the only emotions I know about. What a miserable... I don't believe him. I think he's just saying that. Maybe that's true. I don't think a human being can survive on revenge and guilt. He must have had small moments of pleasure when he's eating fish and chips. It's crazy that he was so poor. His advance for his record was £150. I mean, I know inflation's been crazy since the 70s, but damn, £150? I mean, like in the 80s or 90s, that would have been £150,000, you know? Or at least £15,000. Wow.
I don't know what that means really, and it doesn't exist in my songs.
I feel like he's afraid to be vulnerable. I think he likes playing music, but he's afraid to be vulnerable. He's built up a wall with the fake name. Okay, moving on. And the attractions. Elvis gets arrested. Cool. July to November 77. Columbia Records, Live Stiffs and Pump It Up. Song Watching the Detectives, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
My Aim Is True was finally released in July 1977. By this point, Costello had assembled a backing group, consisting of former Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers drummer Pete Thomas, Quivers' similarly named but unrelated Bruce Thomas on bass, and the classically trained Steve Naive on Vox Continental organ.
Steve Naive. That can't be a real name. I heard in another video recently that there was a band called Red Hot Peppers. Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers, right? I think it was in a general history of British music.
Peppers
was
drummer
it the Andy
Pete
Edwards
Thomas,
video?
Quivers' similarly named but unrelated Bruce Thomas on bass, and the classically trained Steve Naive on Vox Continental organ. I want to get away from...
Not keyboards, Vox Continental organ only. Not a Hammond organ, not a piano, not a Yamaha DX7, a Vox Continental organ. Get it right.
And the classically trained Steve Naive on Vox Continental organ. I want to get away from the conventional group sound. I'd say I want a kind of pop group lineup, but people might take that as something lightweight or trivial. But it will be a pop lineup in the sense that it won't be a rock band.
What? I see a rock band. I see a pretty typical rock band lineup there. Tell me more.
Or trivial. But it will be a pop lineup in the sense that it won't be a rock band. Together, they would be known as the Attractions. While Naive added some budget Bernard Herrmann touches to the non-album single, Watching the Detectives. The actual debut as a band was at Dingwalls in London on the 26th of July. On that same day, there was the annual convention for Columbia Records at London's Hilton Hotel. As such, as a stiff promotional event, Elvis Costello played outside the building with his battery-powered practice amp, making them aware of his presence as an artist, while advertising the Dingwall show. It was all going great until it wasn't. Quite a big crowd gathered very quickly, including quite a few of the big guys at CBS. All these guys were actually standing there and applauding. But the Hilton didn't see the humour in the situation and called the police. The police didn't see the humour in the situation and arrested me.
Rock and roll, Elvis. Way to go. Nice. Causing trouble. I like it.
Released just in time for the gig, Costello was charged the next day for selling records on the street and fined £5. But despite being touted as the next big thing in British pop, with an upcoming Top of the Pops appearance and a soon-to-be Top 20 album, he still did not have this amount on his person and had to request extra time to pay. With some London gigs under their collective...
£5 on his person, they said. So, maybe he had like a couple bucks, or a couple of pounds, but not 5.
...amount on his person and had to request extra time to pay. With some London gigs under their collective belts, over October and November, the band toured the UK with the Live Stiffs package tour, which included label mates Nick Lowe, Reckless Eric, and Ian Dury.
Oh, Ian Dury. I've heard of Reckless Eric. What a voice, huh?
Reckless Eric.
Wow.
And Ian Dury.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Costello.
Y'all be sure to go to Trash Theory and like and subscribe, first of all, but also check out my Ian Dury video that I reacted to.
And Dury taking turns headlining. Competition was rife between Costello and Dury taking turns headlining. Competition was rife between the bands, especially with Dury's seasoned cohort of pub rockers. Inevitably, the tour's one-upmanship on stage began to spill over to the after-show partying. Future single Pump It Up was written and debuted during the Live Stiff shows, inspired by the backstage Bacchanalia. It was scrawled on the fire stairs of a Newcastle hotel.
That reminds me of some other song. Dun, dun, dun. Na, na, na. She's so mean, I'm so bad. No, she's in the Wild Wild West. You know that song?
In an amphetamine and vodka frenzy. It was scrawled on the fire stairs of a Newcastle hotel in an amphetamine and vodka frenzy. This anti-rock and roll song was my last stand before I gave into it completely. The painful morning brought a large but simple editing job, allowing us to learn to play the song the next evening.
Well, it was scrawled on the fire stairs of a Newcastle hotel. On the stairs? Declan, use a piece of paper. You can't take the stairs with you. And he was on those amphetamines, drinking that vodka, anti-rock and roll song. Okay. And then the next day he woke up and read what he wrote and edited it a little bit. And then they played the song the next evening. That's cool.
The song I Don't Want to Go to Chelsea had also been knocked into shape by Costello's new band. He'd written it years previous in the vein of the start-stop rhythm of The Who's I Can't Explain. Bruce Thomas's fluid bassline gave it a punk reggae Clash vibe. While Naive's out-of-tune vox acts as an evil cackle to the lyrical punchline about the changing face of the ultra-hip London district of Chelsea. But bubbling within Costello was a song with its aim focused on the very wellspring of pop, the institution of radio.
Huh. Oh, okay. So he got arrested for busking. They wrote a couple songs. All right. Back up a little bit.
Of Chelsea.
What does that mean? They call her Natasha when her name is Elsie. I don't want to go to Chelsea. I don't get it.
But bubbling within Costello was a song with its aim focused on the very wellspring of pop, the institution of radio.
Oh, he's gonna criticize radio. That might not be good for a career in music, but let's see what happens. Radio is a sound salvation. Elvis bites that hand. 1975 to 78, Radio Soul, the Vox Continental Organ, what? And Top of the Pops song, Radio, Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Okay, yeah, I've heard this.
Radio is the song from Costello's early period, with the longest history. In its original form, it was called Radio Soul, written when he was fronting Flip City around 1975.
I was tuning in the shining the light night dial on the front of my radio.
It reflected on Costello's teenage experiences with pirate radio, which exposed him to Motown, soul, and rock and roll.
Cool.
Radio Soul, it's a sound salvation, right on the airways.
Musically, it was inspired by the wistful Americana of Bruce Springsteen, especially his 1973 The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle album.
Spread out now, Rosie, doctor, come cut loose her mama's reign.
He sort of made it feel like a big dream in America, where a radio was playing and it was always the perfect song. And even though there's sadness in the song, I wanted to believe that somewhere it was like that, and it wasn't like it was in the suburbs, where you couldn't hear any music you liked half the time. So that was a wishful song. By 1977, however, Costello was outwardly dismissive of Springsteen's rose-tinted view, rejecting all influences that weren't punk approved. His stuff about being on the streets is trite and unbelievable. The only song I like of his is E Street Shuffle. I heard it in the bath once and thought it had a good riff. Karma struck when the Attractions made it to Springsteen's New Jersey in December 1977, when Costello made a self-deprecating joke about bassist Bruce Thomas being the real future of rock and roll. People didn't realize I was joking and thought I was having a crack at the local hero. We had to barricade ourselves in the dressing room to avoid being impaled on spikes and immolated on the tilt-a-whirl.
Y'all, Americans don't expect sarcasm. You gotta indicate that you're being sarcastic to American audiences, right? I feel like British audiences expect some sarcasm. They love it, right? Americans, well, we're kind of dumb sometimes.
That Radio Soul mutated into Radio is a product of Costello's ideological shift. In his view, radio had transformed from an escape to a police state. And the song is a venomous attack on the radio powers that be, especially targeting their refusal to play punk on the BBC. God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols was banned from airplay, despite being a huge chart hit. New Wave was the socially accepted face of punk. It may have had the same speed and vitriol, but the name change allowed it to be played on the radio. Radio replaced...
Gregory, do you hear that? It's your kindred spirit. I wonder what Elvis Costello thought of like radio in the late 90s and the early 2000s when Clear Channel was taking over all the independent radio stations. He must have had an aneurysm. I'm surprised he's still alive.
This is its primitive E Street Shuffle with a caffeinated... Radio replaces its primitive E Street Shuffle with a caffeinated take on 1960s beat music. Adrenalized by Naive's Vox Continental organ.
Hey.
What better way to get your song about the evils of radio played on the radio than by utilizing an instrument made famous by some of radio's biggest hits?
Okay.
Saw her face down in New Orleans.
The Beatles used it. Play the Beatles.
Just like that.
Y'all, Brown Eyed Girl, when I hear it, it gets stuck in my head. It's stuck in my head. Light my fire. Right. Okay.
Radio was released.
Now I see why he was so specific about the Vox Continental organ.
Radio was released as a standalone single in October 1978, although it was included on the US version of this year's model. Despite biting the hand that feeds, its pop sensibility and innate catchiness got a Single of the Week accolade on BBC Radio 1, and got decent airplay until someone actually thought to listen to the lyrics.
With every one of those late night stations playing songs bringing tears to my eyes.
DJ Tony Blackburn called Costello a silly little man on air, and commented, "I wonder what radio would be like in the hands of people like Elvis Costello."
Tony, that was the dumbest thing you could have said. You just asking for it.
Despite this, Radio peaked at number 29 and earned the Attractions a trip to Top of the Pops.
Hey.
Introduced by Blackburn, the group
What?
stormed through a riotous version of the track, with a key difference. Instead of
And the radio was in the hands of such a lot of fools trying to anesthetize the way that you feel.
Costello sang the more pointed,
And the radio was in the hands of lots of silly men trying to anesthetize the way that you feel.
while gesturing accusingly at the off-screen Blackburn. It can't have been entirely accidental that almost every appearance on Top of the Pops caused our record to go down the charts. Once the audience got sight of us, they liked us a lot less.
Oh.
But the most memorable television performance of Radio had happened 9 months earlier.
Calling Mr. Oswald.
Interesting. Y'all, I love Elvis Costello's attitude. A lot of rock artists talk the talk, but Elvis is doing it. The guy who introduced them on Top of the Pops. And he changed the lyric. Where's Elvis Costello today? I feel like his voice is gone. I feel, maybe someone like Eminem, but he was more comical than actually speaking truth to power. Okay, here's the SNL episode. Better Do As You Are Told. Elvis Punk's SNL. December 1977. First U.S. tour, being banned from U.S. TV, and Beastie Boys. What? Song Less Than Zero, SNL, Elvis Costello and the Truth.
Because Stiff lacked US distribution, My Aim Is True quickly became the largest selling import LP of 1977. This, along with the Costello getting arrested promotional gimmick, led to a contract with Columbia Records in America.
Nice.
As such, during the tail end of 1977, their attractions toured the mainland US, playing with the diverse likes of Talking Heads, Tom Petty, and Eddie Money.
Nice.
True to form,
Yes.
Costello was rebelling against anything he could find. I had quite a lot of odd ideas back then, and one of them was that we should not play our only ballad, and what was already our best known tune in America. I actually thought that playing Allison every night was making it too easy for people to like us. On December 17th, 1977, the Sex Pistols had been booked to play Saturday Night Live, but their manager, Malcolm McLaren, had failed to get their work visas arranged on time. With the show still wanting to broadcast the first blast of British punk rock on American television, their second choice, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
Okay.
Arriving at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, already things were less than great. None of the cast knew who the band was, and because SNL was not broadcast in the UK, the band had no idea who these comedians were. Costello in particular was not impressed. Maybe something got lost in translation, but none of the humour seemed nearly as dangerous or funny as they seemed to think it was. Or perhaps they were just having a bad show. The Attractions setlist was also a point of contention. The band's US label was pushing them to play Less Than Zero. Not only were the band a bit bored of playing tracks from My Aim Is True, but they had found that Americans couldn't quite understand the song's very English references.
Yeah, the Oswald stuff.
Many believing that Oswald in question to be Lee Harvey.
Yeah.
They wanted to play a new song. I just wanted them to remember us. I didn't really have anything against the show. I was more pissed off at being told what to play by the record company than I was NBC, truthfully. I can't remember whether I said what I was going to do, but I think I just said, watch me. Their first song, Watching the Detectives, went as planned. But for their second song, Costello played a couple of bars of Less Than Zero before stopping himself.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason to do this song here.
And then he led the band into a swirling, full-tilt version of Radio Radio.
It's a better
We
song.
came off the stage and they were very definitely pissed off at us.
Why?
We just went back to the dressing room and laughed ourselves stupid, drank the rest of the vodka and left, pursued by people making dire threats. Their inspiration for the stunt was
I don't think it's a big deal. I think things like that are why people watch Saturday Night Live. They want to see something. It's live. They want to see mistakes. They want to see crazy stuff. They're always on the edge of waiting for something like that to happen. And what's the big deal? So the camera guys don't know exactly who to focus on or what to show when the guitar solo comes. Like, loosen up, Lorne Michaels. I should edit that out. He'll probably sue me. Anyway.
vodka and left, pursued by people making dire threats. Their inspiration for the stunt was in part Jimi Hendrix on The Lulu Show, who stopped a performance of Hey Joe to pay tribute to the recently defunct Cream.
We'd like to stop playing this rubbish and dedicate a song to the Cream.
And diving into Sunshine for Your Love. Producer Lorne Michaels was especially incensed as, being a live program, the new song hadn't been rehearsed, camera cues hadn't been confirmed, and there was a danger of overrunning, therefore fucking with advertisers. As such, the band were told they would never appear on US television ever again. This, though, was not the case.
Yeah, if you're messing with the money, that's when the repercussions come, right?
Yeah. This, though, was not the case. Elvis Costello would appear on US television 3 years later, and reappear on SNL in 1989. Since then, the performance has taken on a mythical status, and is now a key part of the show's history. In 1999, for SNL's 25th anniversary, Costello recreated the moment with the Beastie Boys, sabotaging their performance of Sabotage.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but there's just really no reason to do this song here tonight.
To bolt into Radio Radio.
That's awesome.
The Beasties
I didn't know
acting
that.
as his attractions.
Well, I'm sure I saw this. Y'all, I'm an SNL fan. I've seen every episode. I know I saw this when it happened. I was probably so confused. And I love the Beastie Boys. So I'm sure I saw this. And I realize now I just said the Beastie Boys, when it's actually Beastie Boys. Or as they call themselves on record, Beatsy Boys. Beatsy Boys. Never rock a mic with the pantyhose. Let me take this pantyhose off. In honor of MCA. Taking the pantyhose off my microphone.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey! Ad Rock is playing the Continental Vox Continental organ. Okay, I love that song. Get Happy, The End of Bitterness, 1979, Oliver's Army, That Argument, and Olivia Rodrigo. Song, Oliver's Army, Elvis Costello and the Attractions.
This year's model was followed up by 1979's Armed Forces, Costello's most successful album yet, reaching number 2 in the UK charts. Lead single Oliver's Army is themes of British colonialism and sending the poor off to die, disguised by its arabesque piano trills.
I've heard this. Okay.
Would also become their Attractions' highest charting single ever, remaining at number 2 for 3 weeks. It was only denied the top spot by the combined efforts of the Bee Gees' Tragedy.
My mom's a huge Bee Gees fan, so I heard this so many times. There's a whole clump of brain cells in me that knows Bee Gees songs.
And Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive.
I will survive.
But for the most part, his career in the US was hobbled not by SNL, but a drunken argument in a Columbus, Ohio Holiday Inn with members of Stephen Still's touring party. Costello, in a punkish attempt to rip down the tenets of American music, referred to James Brown and Ray Charles by a racial slur.
What?
After the story was leaked to the press, Costello received death threats and his shows were picketed. At the time, he tried to explain himself. It became necessary for me to outrage these people with the most offensive and obnoxious remarks I could muster
Elvis, no.
to bring the argument to a swift conclusion and rid myself of their presence.
Elvis.
The word had also appeared at the end of the second verse of Oliver's Army, adapted to refer to an Irish immigrant.
Only takes one itchy trigger, one more widow, one less white.
Because of this, the song never charted in the US. Costello was beginning to realize that his spiky, abrasive public persona was bleeding into his real life, so he abandoned it. As such, 1980's Get Happy is a love letter to
I'm sorry to hear that. Putting this back on.
Because of this, the song never charted in the US. Costello was
That'll
beginning
do
to
it.
realize that his spiky,
Although, there have been a lot of songs with that word in them that have charted. A lot of hip-hop songs. But they weren't white people.
abrasive public persona was bleeding into his real life, so he abandoned it. As such, 1980's Get Happy is a love letter to Motown, and was a whole lot less scathing, as if to say, I'm not that guy you think I am. He has since apologized numerous times for his Holiday Inn incident, while in January 2022, he stopped playing Oliver's Army, as he no longer felt it represented him, and urged radio stations to do the same. If I wrote that song today, maybe I'd think twice about it. That's what my grandfather
you
was called
would.
in the British Army. It's historically a fact. But people hear that word, go off like a bell, and accuse me of something that I didn't intend. Despite this, Costello's early work has had a great impact on pop music. The Pretender's jangle was inspired by the guitars of the Angels' Wanna Wear My Red Shoes.
That does sound like Pretenders.
And as such affected a whole lot of modern power pop. The New Pornographers, Fountains of Wayne, Ted Leo and the Pharmacists, and Matthew Sweet. But Costello also spawned much of the caustic
They
nerd
Might Be
rock
Giants.
subcategory. Weezer, Motion City Soundtrack, They Might Be Giants, Spoon, Eels, The Matches, and The Weaker Thans.
Wow,
Fall Out
yeah.
Boy even had Costello guest on What a Catch Johnny.
Keep it kinda this way, you will always know.
No doubt a nod to their similarly embittered, and in hindsight not cool, relationship lyrics early in their respective careers. And in reference to the SNL performance, Weird Al would cover Radio Radio as an emergency song during the mandatory world tour, whenever his setup ran into technical difficulties.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason to play this song. Radio, radio!
In 2021, Olivia Rodrigo was accused of ripping off Pump It Up for her debut album's opener, Brutal.
Yeah.
Asked about
Yeah, I think she's been accused of ripping off a lot of songs. Actually, that's not the first time I've heard that.
it on Twitter, Costello responded, "This is fine by me. It's how rock and roll works. You take the broken pieces of another thrill, and you make a brand new toy. That's
Okay.
what I did."
I mean, yeah, that's true. And you can't copyright a guitar riff, you know?
This alluded to the fact that for his song, Costello had taken the lyrical flow from Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues.
John is in a basement mixing up the mess, and I'm on a pavement thinking about the government.
Of course. Of course.
Which itself had been inspired by Chuck Berry's Too Much Monkey Business.
Running to and fro, hard working at the mill, never fail in the mill, yet come a rotten bill.
If nothing
Oh, of course.
else, the response to Brutal proves that Costello is no longer the acid-spitting Buddy Holly of old, who would deny his points of influence, now going so far as to prevent his own song from receiving radio airplay. But he's not the only thing that has changed. Nowadays, radio itself is not as relevant as it once was, as a way to break music, to make hits. Streaming services, YouTube and TikTok have taken that role, and their power is more on the listener's side to find new music. You don't need to do as the radio tells you. You now have a choice. Radio may not have changed anything itself, but Costello's venom predicted our future. Radio broke because it's old.
It's true.
Thanks for watching. So what do you think?
Thank you.
What's your favorite Elvis Costello song? Let me know by commenting down below. If you like this video, why don't you do me a favor and share it with a couple of people. This way I don't have to rely on YouTube to push my videos.
Y'all be sure to go to Trash Theory and like and subscribe. This was great. Wow. That gives me a lot of new perspective on Elvis Costello. I didn't know about the N-word controversy. I'm glad he apologized a bunch of times. Right, Gregory? Gregory said yes. What's he doing now? How's he presented on Apple Music? Show me on Apple Music. Declan, 2024, The Coward Brothers. Ah, My Aim Is True is his essential album. The Coward Brothers, what is this? Oh, T-Bone Burnett and Elvis Costello. Wow, a lot of songs with stars by them. Let's see what Apple says are his essential songs. Peace, Love, and Understanding. Huh? Okay. Red Shoes. Okay. Radio. Accidents Will Happen. Allison. Veronica. Okay. I didn't realize he was such a contradictor. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think. I didn't realize he was such a punk. I didn't realize he was so combative. I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank you all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.